There's a kind of tiredness that sleep can't fix, the kind that comes from pretending you're fine. It's the exhaustion that hides behind practiced smiles and polite replies, the quiet ache of carrying the world as if it weighs nothing. You wake up already tired, not because your body didn't rest, but because your heart has been performing for too long. You've learned the script so well. When someone asks, "How are you?" you say, "I'm good," not because it's true, but because it's easier than explaining the 1,000 small cracks beneath your skin. You've worn the mask for so long it almost feels like your face now. And that's the cruelest part. The world applauds your strength without ever noticing your struggle. Since childhood, you were taught to be strong, to hold it together, to be the calm one, the reliable one, the one who doesn't make things messy. Somewhere along the way, you started believing that showing pain makes you ungrateful, that needing help makes you weak. So you learned to fold your feelings neatly, tuck them away, and smile through the weight of them. You became the master of composure, unshakable on the outside, unraveling quietly within, but strength that never rests eventually breaks. You start feeling the pressure in strange ways, in the silence that feels too loud, in the laughter that doesn't reach your eyes, in the moments when your reflection looks like someone you're supposed to know but don't. That's what emotional fatigue looks like, not chaos, but numbness. You stop crying, not because you're healed, but because you've run out of energy to explain why you're hurting. Pretending to be okay is a performance that costs your soul. Every "I'm fine" is a small betrayal, a deal you make with yourself to be acceptable, agreeable, unproblematic. And though it keeps the world comfortable, it leaves you invisible. Because when you always appear strong, no one thinks to ask if you need saving too. The truth is, we've built a world that rewards emotional silence. We celebrate resilience, but misunderstand it. Real resilience isn't the absence of tears, it's surviving them. But people don't want to see the raw version of you. They prefer the polished one. So you keep editing yourself for the comfort of others until the story you're living no longer feels like your own. And then one day, the exhaustion catches up, not as a breakdown, but as emptiness. You sit in your room, surrounded by everything you've worked for, and feel nothing. The victories don't satisfy you. The peace you offer everyone else no longer reaches you. It's in that quiet hollow that realization begins to stir. Maybe being okay all the time is not strength. Maybe it's surrender. You start asking yourself questions you've avoided for years. Why do I smile when I want to cry? Why do I say yes when I mean no? Why do I keep proving I'm fine to people who never asked what it cost me? And slowly, the performance begins to unravel. You notice how your voice shakes when you tell even a small truth. You feel both fear and relief when you admit, "I'm not okay." But that admission, fragile as it feels, is the first breath of freedom. Because healing doesn't begin with perfection, it begins with honesty. There is no medal for emotional exhaustion. There's no applause for pretending through pain. You don't owe the world constant composure. You owe yourself the truth. The truth that being human means sometimes breaking, sometimes resting, sometimes needing help. As the night grows quiet, you start to understand. Maybe you've been strong in all the wrong ways. Maybe real strength isn't the act of holding everything together. Maybe it's the courage to finally let go. And that thought, soft but certain, becomes your first step toward peace. Because only when you stop performing okay can you finally become whole. The thing about armor is that it keeps you safe, but it also keeps you distant. Every layer you've built was meant to protect you. The calm tone, the steady smile, the quick "I'm fine." But armor, no matter how beautiful, is still heavy. You don't realize it at first. You think you're just being strong. You mistake protection for peace. Yet over time, the weight of it begins to pull you down. People start calling you reliable, unbreakable, inspiring. They mean it as a compliment. They have no idea that every compliment feels like another lock clicking shut. Because once they believe you're unshakable, they stop offering softness. They forget that you bleed beneath the metal. Strength becomes your identity, not a choice anymore, but a costume that fits too tightly. You wear it to work, to family dinners, to quiet nights when you can't sleep. You wear it even when you're alone, because somewhere along the way, you started believing you must always be in control. You began confusing vulnerability with danger. You've learned to smile through pain so well that even you start believing your own act. You tell yourself you're fine because stopping to feel would mean facing everything you've buried. And so, you keep tightening the armor, polishing it, making sure it never cracks where anyone can see. But what you forget is this. Armor doesn't just keep harm out, it keeps healing out too. There are moments when you long to put it down. You crave softness, a touch, a voice, a safe place to say, "I'm tired." But when people ask, "What's wrong?" you say, "Nothing." Because admitting hurt feels like betraying the strength you've become known for. So you carry the ache quietly, convincing yourself that solitude is safer than disappointment. Inside, though, the pressure builds. You feel it in your chest, in your temples, in the silence that echoes too loudly at night. You start to envy people who can cry freely, who can fall apart and still be loved. You wonder how it must feel to be fragile and still be held. And yet, even in that longing, there's fear. What if you take the armor off and find there's nothing left underneath? What if you've worn it for so long that you've forgotten who you were before you needed it? The idea terrifies you, not because you don't want to be known, but because you're not sure you remember yourself without the mask of endurance. But strength was never supposed to be this lonely. It was meant to carry you through storms, not trap you in stillness. True strength isn't about never breaking. It's about breaking open and still choosing to love what's left. It's the quiet courage of saying, "I can't keep pretending," and meaning it. When you finally let the armor slip, even for a moment, something miraculous happens. You feel air on skin that hasn't breathed in years. It's tender, it stings, but it's real. You realize how long you've lived behind. Walls built from good intentions. You start to see that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's weightlessness. Maybe that's what the world never told you, that softness and strength can coexist, that the bravest thing you'll ever do is let someone see you unguarded, that crying isn't collapse, it's release, and that the hands reaching for you don't always want to take from you. Sometimes they just want to share the load. As you begin to loosen the straps of your armor, you discover the person inside isn't broken, just buried. Buried under expectations, under fear, under the myth that to be loved you must never need. You start to realize that needing help doesn't make you less strong, it makes you more human. And that's where healing begins, not in the silence of pretending, but in the small, brave moments of truth. The kind where you whisper, "I'm not okay," and the world doesn't end. The kind where you stop carrying everything alone. You've spent your life learning how to be strong. Now, it's time to learn how to be real, because the armor was never your power, it was your prison. And every time you take it off, even for a heartbeat, you remember what freedom feels like. There comes a moment when the weight becomes too much. Not suddenly, it's gradual. Like a glass filling drip by drip until one more drop makes it overflow. That's how breaking really happens, quietly, after years of holding it all together. At first, you try to tighten control. You double your routines. You smile wider. You speak less. You tell yourself you just need rest, a distraction, a weekend to reset. But deep down, you know it's not your schedule that's tired, it's your soul. You've been carrying storms behind calm eyes for so long that you've forgotten what peace feels like. Then one day, something small cracks the surface. Maybe it's a careless word from someone you love. Maybe it's a tiny failure you can't shrug off. Or maybe it's just waking up and realizing you feel nothing at all. Whatever it is, it hits differently. The strength that once held you steady suddenly feels fragile, thin, like paper in the rain. You try to hide it. You still go to work. You still laugh at the right times. But inside, you can feel it, the shaking of something coming undone. Your chest feels heavier, your patience shorter. Even silence starts to hurt. It's not the kind of pain that screams. It's the kind that hums beneath your ribs, reminding you you're still pretending. This is the breaking point. The world never talks about, the kind that doesn't look dramatic. There are no tears, no shouts, no collapse in the middle of a crowd. It happens in quiet places, standing in the shower too long, staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., sitting in the car before walking inside. It's the slow recognition that the person you've been performing can't keep living this way. You start asking yourself questions you've avoided for years. Who would I be if I stopped being strong? Would anyone stay if I stopped smiling? Would I still matter if I finally said, I'm tired? And then the truth breaks through. You realize you've spent so long holding everything together that you never noticed the pieces cutting into your hands. You see how your silence has been mistaken for peace, how your endurance has been mistaken for contentment. You finally admit that pretending to be okay isn't noble, it's painful. In that admission, something strange happens, relief. It's terrifying and freeing all at once. The walls you built to survive start to tremble, but light begins to slip through the cracks. You cry not because you're weak, but because you can finally feel again. The tears don't ruin you. They rinse you. They wash off years of pretending. Breaking is not the end. It's the body saying, enough. It's your soul demanding honesty. It's the moment you stop running from yourself. The pain that rises isn't punishment. It's proof that you're still alive, still capable of truth. You begin to see that the life you built out of strength alone was never sustainable. You were never meant to be indestructible. You were meant to be real. And being real means sometimes crumbling, sometimes pausing, sometimes needing help just to breathe again. The breaking point is sacred because it strips everything false. It leaves only what's true, the trembling heart beneath the armor, the voice that says softly, I can't keep doing this, and that whisper, fragile as it is, becomes the most honest sound you've made in years. From that place of collapse, you finally meet yourself, not the composed version, not the strong one, but the raw, unfinished human one. And though you feel empty, there's a strange peace in the emptiness, because for the first time, you're not pretending. Breaking doesn't mean you failed to be strong. It means you've stopped confusing endurance with healing. It means you're finally listening to the part of you that's been begging to rest. The hardest part about pretending is not the act itself, it's the price you pay for it. At first, it feels harmless. A white lie to protect your peace. A quiet, I'm fine to keep the day moving. But with time, those tiny lies start stacking up until they tower over you, casting long shadows on everything real. You tell yourself you're just trying to stay strong. You say the words so often they lose meaning. I'm okay. I'll handle it. It's not a big deal. But deep down, every time you deny your truth, you trade a piece of yourself. You hand away your authenticity for approval, your honesty for harmony. You start existing, not living. Pretending has a cost, and it collects its payment quietly. It begins with small things. You feel tired even after resting. You lose excitement for things you used to love. You begin to avoid mirrors because you don't recognize the person looking back. Your laughter feels rehearsed. Your peace feels rented. You start losing the ability to tell the difference between what you feel and what you're supposed to feel. And the world loves this version of you, the dependable one, the calm one, the strong one. They keep asking for that version again and again, not out of malice, but out of habit. You've trained them to expect your steadiness. You've made your strength their comfort zone. And now, every time you try to be honest, it feels like you're breaking an unspoken contract. So you keep pretending, not because you want to, but because you fear what might happen if you stop. You're scared people will drift away. You're scared they'll call you dramatic. You're scared they'll see your truth and decide it's too much. So you keep swallowing your words, even when they burn your throat. You keep nodding through pain, smiling through ache, performing through emptiness. But the cost keeps rising. You start noticing it in the quiet moments, the fatigue that doesn't fade, the sadness that doesn't need a reason. The way you stare at your phone, hoping someone will ask how you really are, and the way you lie anyway when they do. Pretending becomes so automatic that even you forget what honesty feels like. What no one tells you is that every time you pretend, you create distance between yourself and others, and worse, between yourself and your soul. The mask becomes your new skin. You wear it so long, you start believing it's who you are. But it isn't. It's who you became to survive. And survival, while noble, is not the same as living. Living requires presence. Living requires truth. Pretending robs you of both. It steals your laughter and sells it for silence. It convinces you that being easy to love is more important than being real. It teaches you to hide even from yourself. The emotional debt builds slowly, but its interest is heavy. You begin to pay with your peace, your sleep, your joy. Your body starts speaking the words your mouth refuses to, through tension, through exhaustion, through a restlessness you can't explain. You realize your body has been honest all along. It's your voice that's been pretending. One day, you look around and realize you've created a life full of people who love your mask but don't know your face. They celebrate the strength that is slowly killing you. They praise your grace while you're gasping for air. That's the cruelest irony, to be loved for a version of yourself you no longer wish to be. But awareness changes everything. The moment you recognize the cost, you start wanting a refund. You begin to crave honesty, even if it costs you approval. You start valuing peace more than perfection, authenticity more than applause. And yes, it's terrifying. Letting go of pretending feels like unlearning your own language. But somewhere beneath all that fear, a small voice whispers, "You were never meant to earn love by pretending. You were meant to be loved for simply existing." That whisper becomes your compass. It points you toward truth, shaky, unfiltered, but real. Because the cost of pretending is your life unlived, and you've already paid enough. There comes a time when you realize you're not craving love, you're craving understanding. You're not asking for grand gestures or endless attention. You just want someone to look at you and see the exhaustion behind your eyes, to notice the silence between your words, to hear the story you've been too tired to tell. We live in a world obsessed with noise, where everyone talks, but few truly listen. And somewhere in that noise, you lost the comfort of being understood. You learned to simplify your feelings into sentences people could digest. You started saying, "I'm okay," because it was easier than explaining the complexity of your chaos. But deep down, there's a hunger, a longing not for sympathy, but for recognition. For someone to see beyond your calm and say, "You don't have to hold it together today." For someone to notice that your silence isn't peace, it's fatigue. That your smile isn't joy, it's endurance. Being misunderstood is its own kind of loneliness. It's sitting in a room full of people and realizing no one truly sees you. It's telling a story in fragments because you already know they won't get the full version. It's laughing with friends while feeling like a ghost among the living. You start to fade, not because you're invisible, but because being seen wrongly hurts more than not being seen at all. You try to explain yourself, but words betray you. They shrink your emotions into definitions too small to hold them, so you stop talking about it. You bury your depth. You tell yourself that not everyone needs to understand you. But that truth, while freeing, also aches. Because being misunderstood for too long starts to make you doubt your own clarity. You begin to wonder, am I too complicated, too emotional, too much? You start trimming your truth into pieces that fit neatly into others' comfort zones. You learn to translate your feelings into silence, because silence can't be misinterpreted, but the cost is heavy. Silence keeps you safe, but it also keeps you unseen. All your life, you've been trying to earn understanding through perfection. You believed if you were kind enough, calm enough, composed enough, maybe someone would finally look deeper. But people rarely see what they're not ready to feel. Some will only meet you at the level of their own awareness, and that's not your fault. Understanding, you realize, isn't something you can demand. It's something that happens when hearts align, when two people decide to see, not just to look. And while it's rare, it's real. There will be moments sacred, fleeting, where someone listens without trying to fix you, where they sit with your silence instead of filling it, where they understand your pain without needing a map. And those moments change everything. Because when you're understood, you remember what it means to belong. You start breathing easier. The noise in your head softens. You stop performing. You stop editing. You start existing again, unfiltered and unafraid. But before the world understands you, you must learn to understand yourself. You must sit with your own silence long enough to hear what it's been trying to say. You must stop running from your own voice. Stop silencing your truth for the comfort of others. Because the first person who needs to truly hear you is you. When you finally start understanding yourself, something beautiful happens. You stop seeking validation and start seeking alignment. You stop forcing connection and start attracting resonance. You no longer beg to be seen, you simply shine. The desire to be understood never really leaves. It just transforms. It becomes less about finding someone who listens and more about becoming someone who speaks honestly. It's about building a life where your truth doesn't need translation, where being real feels safer than being right. So yes, you still want to be understood, but not by everyone. Only by those who have the courage to listen without judgment. And until they come, you'll fill the space with your own understanding, your own compassion, your own quiet love. Because the truth is, being misunderstood hurts, but misunderstanding yourself hurts more. And once you truly understand your own heart, you'll never again beg anyone else to. Healing doesn't always arrive like sunlight. Sometimes it comes like rain, soft, relentless, cleansing. It doesn't ask for permission. It simply falls, washing away the lies you told yourself to survive. Honesty is where that healing begins. Not the kind of honesty you share with others, but the kind that requires you to face your reflection without flinching. The kind that whispers, "I'm not okay, but I want to be." For years, you've spoken in half-truths, not because you wanted to lie, but because honesty felt too heavy. You learned to hide behind politeness, behind smiles, behind "I'm fine." You built walls of words that sounded brave but weren't true. You became fluent in pretending. But honesty, real, raw honesty, is different. It doesn't perform. It doesn't protect. It exposes. And at first, that exposure stings. It feels like standing naked in front of your own soul. You see your exhaustion, your disappointments, your forgotten dreams. You meet the parts of yourself you've avoided for too long. The truth doesn't hurt because it's cruel. It hurts because it's cleansing. And once it enters, everything false begins to fall away. You start small. You tell yourself the truth in whispers. "I'm not happy. I'm tired of pretending. I miss who I used to be." The words feel fragile at first, like glass that might shatter if you speak too loudly. But the more you say them, the stronger they sound. The truth doesn't weaken you, it rebuilds you. Healing through honesty isn't about confessing everything to everyone. It's about no longer lying to yourself. It's about being able to stand in front of your pain and say, "Yes, you exist, and I'm ready to face you." Because denial is what kept you broken, not the pain itself. At first, honesty feels lonely. When you stop saying, "I'm fine," some people pull away, not because they don't care, but because your truth reminds them of their own. They liked the version of you who made everything look easy, the unshakable one, the comforter, the listener. But honesty has a way of shaking illusions, both yours and theirs. You'll lose people who loved your mask, but you'll find those who love your face. You'll attract those who find beauty in your vulnerability. People who don't need you to be perfect, just present. And as your circle grows smaller, your peace grows larger. Something shifts when you begin to tell the truth. Your body relaxes. Your laughter sounds different, lighter, real. The air feels cleaner around you. You realize how much energy pretending used to steal. You stop replaying conversations in your head, trying to sound stronger. You start breathing in full sentences again. Honesty teaches you to forgive yourself too. You forgive the moments you fake strength because you had no other choice. You forgive the times you stayed silent because the world wasn't safe for your truth yet. You forgive the versions of you that only knew how to survive, because even pretending was an act of love, a way of protecting what little peace you had left. And that's when the healing deepens. You realize that the truth doesn't destroy, it purifies. Every time you tell it, you shed a little more pain. Every time you choose honesty over approval, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. You begin to understand that healing isn't becoming someone new. It's remembering who you were before the pretending began. The truth leads you back there, slowly, gently, patiently. One day, you'll wake up and realize you no longer start your mornings with a sigh. You no longer wear your smile like armor. You no longer need to convince anyone, not even yourself, that you're okay. You'll be okay, not because you said it, but because you meant it. And when that happens, you'll know. Honesty didn't just set you free, it brought you home. Because the truth, no matter how heavy, will always weigh less than pretending. There comes a moment when the noise finally fades, not because the world grows quieter, but because you stop fighting yourself. It's subtle at first, a stillness in your chest where chaos used to live. You breathe, and for once, it doesn't feel forced. You smile, and it isn't a disguise. You realize this is what peace feels like, not the absence of pain, but the presence of truth. For the first time in years, you don't feel like you're performing. You don't have to measure your worth by how useful you are or how calm you seem. You don't have to carry conversations you don't believe in or laugh when your heart feels heavy. You just exist, raw, honest, imperfect. And somehow, that feels enough. Peace doesn't arrive all at once. It sneaks in slowly, through small acts of authenticity. The text you don't send, the boundary you hold, the moment you say no without apology. It comes when you stop chasing understanding and start choosing alignment. When you stop proving and start being, you realize peace was never lost. It was buried under expectations, under shoulds and musts, and keep it together. It was hidden beneath the armor you wore to be loved. Beneath every fake smile and quiet nod, peace waited patiently for you to stop performing long enough to notice it was still there. And now that you've found it, you protect it differently. You no longer let everyone have access to you. You learn that peace is expensive, too costly to give to chaos. You stop explaining your choices to those who thrive on misunderstanding. You stop trying to fix people who enjoy breaking things. You stop showing up in spaces that demand your silence as proof of your kindness. Instead, you start showing up for yourself. You start honoring your own rhythm. Some days you shine, some days you stumble, but neither defines you. You begin to trust your own timing, your own process, your own heart. You start to understand that being real will sometimes cost you people, but it will always bring you back to yourself. The world may not clap for this version of you. It might even resist it. Because authenticity makes people uncomfortable. It exposes what they hide. But peace doesn't need applause. It only needs truth. You stop performing for love and start living in love. You stop seeking perfection and start embracing presence. You stop running from your emotions and start walking beside them gently, honestly, fearlessly. There's a new kind of strength in this version of you, one that doesn't roar, it breathes, one that doesn't demand attention, it radiates calm, the kind of strength that can sit in silence without drowning in it, the kind that doesn't need to prove it's healed, it just exists, soft and grounded. You begin to see beauty where pain once lived. You start noticing small joys again, morning light on your skin, laughter that isn't rehearsed, the comfort of solitude that doesn't feel lonely anymore. You realize that peace isn't loud. It hums quietly in the background, steady as a heartbeat. And when people ask how you're doing, you no longer say, I'm fine. You say, I'm real. Because fine was survival, but real is freedom. You've stopped hiding behind strength and started living from softness. You've learned that peace isn't found in being perfect, it's found in being whole. This is what the end of pretending feels like. Not a grand announcement, not a sudden transformation, but a gradual return to yourself. It's a quiet homecoming where the mask finally falls and you realize you never needed it. And in that stillness, you find what you were searching for all along. Not validation, not applause, not approval, just peace. The kind that doesn't leave when life gets hard. The kind that stays when the world doesn't understand. The kind that whispers, you don't have to be okay to be worthy. You just have to be you. Because the greatest freedom you'll ever know isn't being strong, it's being real.